Coming up in our newscast tonight. A South Korean team of inspectors returned after checking facilities in North Korea where the long-awaited and overdue reunion of separated families will be held. There's a lot of work to be done as the venue has not been used since 2015. The headquarters of the U.S. troop station in South Korea have been moved from Seoul to Pyeongtaek. The opening ceremony of the biggest overseas U.S. base in the world is attended by the USFK commander and the nation's defense chief. Earlier today, South Korea's benchmark index dips below the 2,300 mark for the first time since last May, but it climbed back up with investors focused more on bright corporate earnings than trade disputes. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Choi. The South Korean team that crossed the border to inspect the facilities for a family reunion slated for August wrapped up their trip today. Conclusion, a comprehensive renovation is needed at Mount Kumgang as the place has not been used in a long while. Oh Jung-hee has our top story.
A group of South Koreans who visited North Korea to prepare for reunions of families separated by the Korean War returned from a 3-day trip Friday afternoon. The team had 20 people, including workers from the South Korean Red Cross and the private sector firm Hyundai Asan and technicians. They were led by Kim Byung-dae, the Director General of the Humanitarian Cooperation Bureau of Seoul's Unification Ministry. They inspected the Mount Kumgang Resort, the venue for the family reunions, checking the meeting rooms, hotels, rest areas, the fire station, and the electricity supplies. When they arrived back in the South, the team told reporters South and North Korean technicians inspected the facilities together and things went smoothly thanks to close cooperation from the North. They added that the resort needs a great deal of renovation as it's not been used in a long time since October 2015. The team stressed that the two Koreas will get down to renovation soon after a review by South Korean experts and inter-Korean discussions. Seoul and Pyongyang agreed in the Red Cross talks last Friday to hold reunions of separated families at North Korea's Mount Kumgang for a week starting August 20th. 100 participants each from South and North Korea will have a chance to meet their relatives on the other side of the border. The South Korean Red Cross this week chose 500 candidates for the reunion through computerized random selection. The organization will eventually narrow that number down to 100 after checking on the candidates' health, their willingness to participate, and whether their family members in the North are still alive. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Also next week, inter-Korean basketball games will be held in Pyongyang. South Korea sent a list of some 100 names to the North this afternoon. The group is comprised of 5 government officials, 50 male and female basketball players, 30 members of the press, and 15 staff. They'll be led by the nation's unification minister, Cho Myung-kyun. The two Koreas will play 4 games in total, 2 games each on Wednesday and Thursday. It's decided national flags or anthems won't be used. Seoul and Pyongyang agreed last Monday to hold the friendlies while discussing sports cooperation. There are reports America's top diplomat will visit Pyongyang again next week. The possible objective of the trip, keeping the pressure on North Korea to speed up denuclearization efforts. Cha Sang-mi fills us in on what to expect.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will reportedly visit North Korea next week, according to the Financial Times. Citing 4 unnamed U.S. officials, the newspaper on Thursday said Pompeo has canceled a planned July 6 meeting with his Indian counterpart in Washington in order to fly to Pyongyang. The officials added that the joint declaration signed by U.S. President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un on June 12th stipulated that Pompeo would hold follow-on talks with an unnamed senior North Korean official at the earliest possible date, but had given no timeline. The visit will be the first senior-level meeting between the two sides since the historic summit in Singapore. The U.S. State Department wouldn't confirm the Financial Times report. Pompeo traveled to North Korea twice before the Singapore summit, the most recent in May when he returned to the U.S. with 3 American hostages who had been detained in the North. The report comes after Pompeo testified to the Senate Appropriations Committee on Wednesday, where he stated that contacts with North Korea are ongoing, with him in charge of the communication. Pompeo said he was sure the regime knows the scope of denuclearization the Trump administration is calling for. He had also confirmed that no remains of U.S. soldiers killed during the Korean War have been handed over by the North, but said he was optimistic they will be in the not-too-distant future. 차상미, Arirang News.
The top diplomats of Seoul and Washington held a phone meeting today. During their fourth discussion since the historic summit in Singapore, the duo updated each other on recent progress made regarding North Korea's denuclearization and touched on relevant strategies for creating permanent peace on the peninsula. South Korean Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa shared the results of the Seoul-Moscow summit and progress in inter-Korean relations. Mike Pompeo explained Washington's plans in preparing for follow-up negotiations with Pyongyang. They agreed now is a critical time in pushing for the regime's denuclearization and promised to work together at high and working levels. Following a meeting here in the nation, Washington's defense chief traveled to Tokyo for talks with his Japanese counterpart. The two sides agreed to continue military drills and cooperate on denuclearizing North Korea. Park Hee-jun shares with us what was discussed.
Washington and Tokyo have agreed to continue their joint military exercises. During a meeting between U.S. Secretary of Defense James Mattis and Japanese Defense Minister Itsunori Onodera in Tokyo on Friday, the two sides agreed to keep their joint military drills going, as well as the trilateral exercises with South Korea for the stability of the region.
We agreed to strengthen the deterrence and defense capabilities of the alliance through the steadfast implementation of Japan-U.S. joint drills.
The two sides also reaffirmed their goal of North Korea's complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization. Mattis said the U.S. and Japan will continue to work together to achieve their goal based on their firm alliance.
Our objective remains the complete, irreversible, and verifiable dismantling of North Korea's nuclear and ballistic missile programs.
And as for the issue of Japanese abductees in North Korea, Mattis expressed solidarity with the Japanese government over the issue and said that humanitarian issues are always part of their deliberations. Japan is Mattis's last stop of his Asian tour after China and South Korea. The previous day, he assured the South Korean government of their ironclad alliance and that the U.S. would maintain its troop levels in South Korea. He also backed the suspension of joint military exercises, saying that it will help diplomats negotiate with North Korea. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
UN Command and U.S. Forces Korea have a new HQ. They'll be leaving the base in the nation's capital and move to Camp Humphreys, located in Pyeongtaek, Gyeonggi-do Province. Park Ji-won takes us to the opening ceremony held this morning.
The UN Command and U.S. Forces Korea held a ceremony Friday morning to officially open their new headquarters at Camp Humphreys in Pyeongtaek, Gyeonggi-do Province, some 70 kilometers south of Seoul, with hundreds of key military officials, including South Korea's Defense Minister Song Yang-moo and the commander of UN Command and U.S. Forces Korea, General Vincent Brooks.
The current turning point on the Korean peninsula is a result of the ROK-US alliance, a win without fighting through overcoming lots of difficulties. In this new era, troops of the UN Command and U.S. Forces Korea stationed in Pyeongtaek will assume new missions to contribute to the peace and stability of the Korean peninsula and the world as a stabilizing presence in Northeast Asia.
Today marks an historic milestone in the history of United Nations Command, which began in 1950, and in the history of the Republic of Korea-U.S. alliance. United Nations Command will continue to be the home for international commitments, with a mandate to restore peace and security in defense of the Republic of Korea. And U.S. Forces Korea will remain the living proof of the American commitment to the alliance.
General Brooks also expressed gratitude towards South Korea's financial contributions, saying Seoul covered over 90% of the nearly $11 billion that cost to build a complex. President Moon Jae-in also sent a congratulatory message stressing the ROK-U.S. alliance has been the foundation of not only the peace and stability of the Korean peninsula, but also the democratization and economic development of the South. The new base covers over 14 square kilometers or some 3,560 acres. When complete, it will contain military facilities, schools, hospitals, and even golf courses. This is the largest overseas U.S. base in the world, currently accommodating some 23,000 people, including U.S. military officials and their families, and the base is expected to grow to some 43,000 people by 2022. With the relocation, the United Nations Command and U.S. Forces Korea are leaving Yongsan, their home for the past 6 decades, and plan to complete their move to Camp Humphreys by the end of this year. Meanwhile, the ROK-U.S. Combined Forces Command will relocate to a building inside South Korea's Defense Ministry in central Seoul by the end of the year. Park Ji-won, Arirang News, Pyeongtaek.
North Korea is becoming a holiday hotspot for Chinese tourists. According to a travel agency from that country specializing in tours to the regime, the number of visitors in June alone went up 100-fold compared to the start of the year. Group tours for students are sold out for July ahead of the summer holiday season. Rail tours have also been popular with stops at Pyongyang, Siniju, and Kaesong, and the inter-Korean village of Panmunjom. The surge in such travel comes after Kim Jong-un and President Xi Jinping agreed to strengthen cultural exchanges when the young leader visited Beijing earlier this year. While tourism had not been subject to Chinese sanctions on the regime, tours to the north had been curbed last year due to international pressure on Beijing to do more to rein in its neighbor and longtime ally. South Korea's main stock index briefly touched its lowest level in 13 months. Analysts attributed the brisk dip to the trade spat between China and the United States. Our Koo Kwang-mo help us look beyond the numbers.
Financial indices in Seoul briefly plunged on Friday. In the morning, the benchmark KOSPI dropped below the 2300 level, at one point touching 2296, its lowest point since May last year. But the KOSPI rebounded in the afternoon, ultimately posting a gain for the day. It closed at 2326, up 0.5% from the previous session. Analysts attributed the brief fall to the trade spat between China and the U.S., which investors see as having a direct effect on South Korea.
Many South Korean exporters make parts that go into Chinese and American goods. If the trade war intensifies, the exports to these countries will likely decrease.
Another main reason is an outflow of foreign capital that picked up after the U.S. Federal Reserve raised interest rates earlier this month. Some also pointed to local companies performing poorly in the second quarter. Profit estimates for KOSPI-related companies in the second quarter have been revised down 8% compared to the start of the year. Analysts say the future depends heavily on China and the U.S. If President Trump goes ahead and imposes more tariff on China in July, stocks will likely fall again. Meanwhile, Korea's junior stock index, the KOSDAQ, dipped by 5 points in the morning, but recovered for a nearly 1% gain. Koo Kwang-mo, Arirang News.
The nation's overall industrial output climbed in May. Automobile and telecommunication sectors drove the numbers up from the previous month. However, according to our Won Jung-hwan, there's still lingering pessimism about the current business environment.
Industrial production in May increased by 0.3% from the previous month. According to data by Statistics Korea on Friday, South Korea's industrial output increased in May from a month earlier on the back of a rise in production in the automobile and telecommunication sectors. Industrial production figures can fluctuate slightly based on a wide range of factors, some not directly related to the economy.
These numbers are usually gathered monthly, and well, some months you have more working days, you have less working days, you have more sunnier days, you have more cloudy days, so the numbers themselves can vary quite a bit between each month.
But retail sales fell for the second month in a row, dropping by 1% due to sluggish sales in the domestic automobile sector. The Equipment Investment Index in May also fell by 3.2% from the previous months and 4.1% from the same period last year. And businesses have a gloomy outlook for the near future. According to the Bank of Korea on Friday, South Korean manufacturing businesses' expectations for the upcoming months came to 80 on the Business Survey Index, up by 1 point from the figure for June. BSI is an indicator of the business conditions expected for the coming month, and a reading below 100 means the number of companies pessimistic about the business environment is larger than those with a positive outlook. According to an expert, the U.S. China trade dispute could have affected business forecasts as South Korea depends highly on exports to the world's two largest economies.
The BSI does not seem to reflect any real effect from the U.S.-Chinese trade conflict so far. But some of the forward indicators, the sentiment index for the future does seem to have dampened down a bit. And I think that is in large part due to concerns about the trade war.
There is speculation that the country's exports of intermediary products to the U.S. and China will be hit by the fall in overall production of certain goods amid the escalating trade dispute between the two countries. 원정환, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, the board of LG Group named Koo Kwang-mo its CEO. The son of the group's late chair, Koo Bon-mo, becomes the fourth generation of the family to head the company. It's the first time that a great-grandchild of a founder of one of the 10 largest Korean conglomerates takes the helm. Meanwhile, the jailed head of Lotte Group, Shin Dong-bin, was bagged by Japanese shareholders in a vote today to keep his seat on the board. Lotte Holding is a holding firm for Lotte's Japanese businesses with major stakes in the group's Korean units, rejected the motion to dismiss him during its shareholders' meeting in Tokyo. Shin was sentenced to 2.5 years in February for bribery linked to former President Park Geun-hye and her close friend. Since taking office last May, President Moon Jae-in has been pushing for income-led expansion as a way to help narrow the wealth gap and achieve sustainable growth in the country. Experts evaluated the policy and its effect on the Korean economy. For more on their analysis, we turn to our Kim Hye-sung.
Income-led growth, along with job creation, innovative growth, and a fair economy have been the key pillars of President Moon Jae-in's economic policies. The goal has been to create a virtuous cycle of raising the incomes of the lower middle class to help boost consumption, raise productivity, and reduce the wealth gap.
The income-led growth policies intends to introduce a set of the policies which intends to improve the income distribution, and in doing so, actually achieving higher and more stable economic growth. So it's very important right now to introduce all set of the structural policy measures to fundamentally address the income inequality.
Last year, the Moon administration injected a supplementary budget worth nearly $10 billion to expand employment and welfare programs. Early this year, the government hiked the hourly minimum wage by 16.4% to about $6.70 for the biggest jump in nearly 2 decades. But despite those measures in the first quarter this year, the gap in incomes between the wealthiest and the least wealthy Koreans widened to nearly 6 times. According to Statistics Korea, the monthly average incomes of those in the bottom 20% income bracket dropped 8% in the first quarter, making it the steepest decrease since 2003. Number of newly added jobs dropped on year, and in May, the unemployment rate jumped from last year's 3.6% to 4%.
The minimum wage hike has put a burden on small firms and the self-employed, but it's not the only cause for the worsening wealth gap and sluggish job growth. This has to do with numerous factors, including weak household consumption and a slowing business cycle. Income-led growth is a move in the right direction. What we need are more complementary measures to minimize its negative effects.
Experts say it's still early to evaluate the effects of the income-led growth policy, but they agree that an effective policy mix, including deregulation across various sectors, redistribution policies, tax measures, and public investment will be needed to actually help raise household income, consumption, and productivity in the long run. Kim Hye-sung, Arirang News.
The presidential office will go green by cutting the use of disposable items. According to a written statement from the top, the Cheongwade will start giving out eco-friendly mugs as souvenirs for visitors instead of plastic products. It will also encourage staff to use reusable bags and greener water bottles rather than plastic consumables and paper cups. 20 of its business vehicles will be replaced with electric, hybrid, or hydrogen-powered cars. Charging stations will be installed within the grounds of the top office and the visitors' parking lot. The Taeguk Warriors return home after wrapping up their World Cup run in Russia. It was a bittersweet experience as they failed to make it to the knockout stage even after taking the defending champs to school with a 2-0 victory. Regardless, many devoted fans were at the airport to show the national squad their appreciation. Among them was our Kan Young-woo.
South Korea's men's national football team have returned home after their roller coaster of a World Cup campaign in Russia. They got a warm welcome Friday afternoon from the fans and reporters waiting for them at Incheon International Airport. Team Korea failed to move past the group rounds, having lost against Sweden and Mexico, but in the eyes of many, they won some redemption with a stunning 2-0 upset against defending champions Germany in the final match of Group F. The BBC even selected South Korean forward Son Heung-min and goalkeeper Cho Hyun-woo as 2 of the best 11 players in the group rounds.
I feel like we could have done better at the World Cup. Beating Germany in the final match was the result of our players' determination to win. About being selected in group round's best 11, I want to give all the credit to my teammates.
I've always dreamed of playing in the World Cup, so I'm just really thankful for this opportunity. I hope you can look forward to me playing in the next World Cup as well, but I'm coming back to the K-League and will give my best there.
Some of the players will get some much-needed rest before reporting back to their respective club teams, while others will prepare to join the under-23 team for the Asian Games in Jakarta in August.
I'm glad we won as a team, but for me personally, I wish I'd played better.
I'm just really thankful and happy. I'm not sure what the future holds for me, but please keep supporting us.
South Korea did not reach the round of 16, but their last win over the defending World Cup champions Germany will be remembered as one of the most famous victories in their recent history. Kan Young-woo, Arirang News.
We now shift our attention to the latest on the volcanic activity in Bali. Ngurah Rai International Airport on the Indonesian holiday island has resumed operations on Friday local time. Airport officials, however, said airplanes could be grounded again if severe volcanic activity that could affect flight safety is detected. The international air hub was temporarily shut down, causing more than 300 flights to be canceled due to volcanic rumble and an ash cloud belched by Mount Agung starting on Thursday. The decision was made as volcanic ash can seriously damage aircraft engines. Mount Agung, sitting on the eastern part of the island, has been active intermittently since late last year. Meanwhile, according to local authorities, small tremors have been detected and the mountain status remains on alert level, the second highest danger warning. Back here in the nation, it looks like we'll be facing our first typhoon of the year. Formed near Okinawa, Japan's southernmost prefecture, Typhoon Prapirun, the 7th storm in the northwest Pacific this year, is forecast to reach South Korea's Jeju-do Island next Monday, then hit mainland Chungcheongnam-do Province later that day. The Minister of Public Administration and Security convened an emergency meeting. Deputy heads of regional governments and directors at related ministries were urged to take necessary precautions to minimize civilian casualties and possible damages like flooding as well as landslides. Time to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates we need before planning our weekend. Michelle, when it rains, it pours here in Korea.
Daniel, the monsoon front will fully affect the peninsula as it moves northwards. It will begin again from the south coast after midnight and spread to the rest of the nation by the morning. And from tomorrow to Sunday, most regions will get between 40 to 100 millimeters of rain, whereas the capital and the south coast will receive heavier amounts. That's a lot to take in, but there's more to be aware this weekend as Typhoon Prapirun will slam ashore over southwest Korea. And as of now, it's looking to come up to Jeollado provinces by early next week, bringing massive amounts of precipitation to the whole nation. And tomorrow morning, most places, including Seoul, will start the day at 22 degrees Celsius. And even without much sun, the mercury in Seoul will rise up to 27, while it's lower in Busan at 25 degrees. The trajectory of the typhoon can vary, but currently we are looking at more rain in store until Monday. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we could pack into our newscast at this hour. Thank you for staying with us. Have an incredible weekend.